Well, hello, everyone. I am so excited to be presenting yet again for the Florida Interest Network. It's kind of interesting tonight. We are the Florida and Alaska Interest Network, apparently, because we have 3 Alaskans in attendance, which is quite delightful. And I also know that we have people from all over Florida present tonight in Miami and Jacksonville and let's see, St. Pete. So this is terrific. For those of you who don't know me or who are listening to this on YouTube, I am Dr. Annalyn Schooley, marriage and family therapist here in South Florida, in the Fort Lauderdale area generally. And I am the current chair of the Florida Interest Network, which is the geographic interest network that's connected to AAMFT. And we encourage you, of course, to join AMFT if you're not already a member. And shortly you will, we hope, be able to join Florida Interest Network as well. And if you aren't already a member of the family team, which you can join without being even an AAMFT member. The Florida team is the advocacy and legislative arm of AMFT. So join the Florida team or the family team. It's free. And you don't have to be an AMFT member. They welcome everybody into advocacy. So this evening, we are continuing our series of models for beginners. Our first outing was with Dr. Barron there from Albizu University on Bowen, and she had a much finer presentation put together with a PowerPoint and all that. I was doing good to get a Word document, so that's what we have to do. But I will be kind of working my way through these notes, and I welcome people to stop me and ask questions and ask for examples and things like that. All right, so are there any initial questions anybody want to ask or questions you want to be sure that I cover before I jump in? Anything preliminary?
I have something.
Yes, Carla.
So this is kind of vague, but it's something that I see a lot is because MRI is it's based on, I'm forgetting all my lingo at this moment. Because it is, what is that called? It's relational. It's a relational model, and our society is not relational. Sometimes I see like people come in and they think that this is what they need to be helped or to get where they want to go. But then if you use a relational model with them, they're like, this is a waste of my time. Like, why, like, this isn't meeting me where I'm at, or this isn't what I thought I needed, or like, why are you talking about that? Or why is that important?
Yeah, why are you asking about my family members? And why are you asking about these kinds of things? Yeah.
And so I guess I'm just kind of curious about getting buy-in from people in a society that is not relational when you're using a relational model.
Excellent. All right. Well, so thank you for that question. And the first place that I would have people go who have that question is to one of the 2 major books of MRI. One is called Tactics of Change, and the other one is just called Change. The authors of Tactics of Change, if I remember correctly, are Dick Schwartz, John Weekland, and Paul Václavic. And I do have a reference list at the end of this document that I'll have up on the screen long enough that you can take your camera and take a picture of it if you like. So those 2 books, Change explains the theory in a very highly theoretical way. And Tactics of Change is a bit more consumable, but what's really nice, it has 3 case studies at the end of it. And one of them is of an individual case. So they apply MRI to an individual client, but still use all the same techniques. So as Carla knows, because she used to be my student, I believe that no matter what the problem is, it's happening in a relationship. And so the client may not see it that way. They may think it's somehow inside them. And that's why we use our models to help people look more broadly. So if Irma were doing this presentation, she'd say, let's pull out a genogram and start looking at that individual within the context of their family going back several generations. MRI is going to look at that same person within the context of their interactions in present day with the people currently in their life. And as we go to other models, hopefully someday we'll do something on narrative, etc. We can talk about both the use with an individual client or with multiple people in the room. But these ideas are no less effective if you're working with one person in the room, because if you're like me, you hallucinate all those people in the room with you. Now, don't tell the psychologist that I hallucinate, okay? But I just imagine them all in the room with me so that I'm having conversations about their perspectives as well. And of course, then we have to see how, as we ask the client, so if your mom were here, what would they think? And by the way, those kinds of questions, those relational questions, really kind of more belong to the Milan people. But, after a while, we all borrow from each other. They're good questions, so why not use them all? So those kind of relational questions would show up in an MRI session as well, particularly if the people in question were not in the actual room. And getting buy-in is really more from the very beginning. An opening question, since you've asked, I'll jump to that. An opening question in MRI is how can we be helpful? What is the thing you want to work on? They might call it the problem, they might call it the concern, we'll call it whatever they call it. But what is the problem, or what is it you want to be different? And how is that a problem? I remember I was doing supervision. I wasn't the supervisor, I was a student in a group supervision with a bunch of social workers. And they were talking about a particular case where this elderly lady was doing things and, in the facility. And my question was, how is that a problem? And the social work students looked at me like I had 14 heads. What do you mean, how is that a problem? No, really, how is that a problem? For whom is it a problem? Those are the opening questions for MRI. I'm not going to make an assumption just because somebody says they're depressed or that their kid's acting out or whatever, no matter what it is. I'm not going to make an assumption that I know how that is a problem for them. Now, those of you who are narratively bent will hear how that is part of the mapping the problem on the person or the family, right? So it's a very similar kind of thing. And what we'll find as we go along here is that MRI is one of those models that basically spawned off many of the other models. Let me give you that little history. MRI, Mental Research Institute, was an institute that was put together. It's in California, in the Monterey area. And it was a group originally of researchers who were studying human behavior under the great Gregory Bateson. And if Gregory Bateson is not a name you know, that's because whatever education you did didn't go all the way back. Gregory Bateson, who was married to Margaret Mead, who was a famous anthropologist, was studying human behavior. And it is through their study that they discovered things like the double bind. They theorized the idea of the interactional cycles. He wrote many books that are incredibly difficult to read. Mind in Nature, Steps to an Ecology of Mind. These are very challenging books to read, but they are the human behavior version of the theory that Gregory Bateson glommed onto, which is cybernetics. Now, cybernetic theory is the theory of systems in motion. And it originally was devised to look at the interaction between the machine gun and the thing it was shooting at, and how the thing it was moving, and that interaction between the thing and aiming at the thing. And that's a dynamic system that's happening. So from a cybernetic perspective, What we're looking at is informational loops, what Bateson would call mind. He didn't think that this was mind. He thought that everything in the planet interacting with each other is mind, or that idea of Gaia, right? The living planet. So everything is connected to everything. Many of you have heard me say this. Everything is connected to everything. There's no thing that you cannot find some sort of a connection to the other things that are going on around it. So it's an ecology, right? Steps to an ecology of mind, very ecological belief system. At the time that Bateson and Jay Haley and Insoo Kim Berg and Steve DeShazer, Virginia Satir, as well as Dick Schwartz, Paul Václavic, John Weakland, Don Jackson. These are all the first fathers and mothers of marriage and family therapy. They are the originators. On the West Coast. We go to the East Coast and we've got Murray Bowen and his cadre, and maybe Bazar-Ménage and those folks. But I would say Bowen and MRI are like the two classic first models that everything else grew out of in one way or another. So as you see here, I have a list of assumptions from the cybernetic theory. So all behavior is communication at some level. So cybernetics and communication theory, two separate theories, but they kind of hang out together. The idea of that you cannot not communicate. Saying nothing is just as communicative as saying anything. That the unsent letter is just as much a communication. This is one of the assumptions that we have. How many times have you worked with couples or seen couples on TV and their complaint is that we don't know how to communicate? And my answer is you're communicating extensively. You just don't like what you're communicating. You don't like what you're hearing, but you're communicating all the time because we cannot not communicate. The types of communication are involved in, and these, for those of you who are going to take the exam, these are exam questions, report and command. The idea that there's two lines of communication happening simultaneously, the report, the things one actually says, and the command, which is the secondary unspoken message that is a commentary on the relationship between the people. So if you've never met anybody, mostly what you're listening to is the report, what they say. But the longer you know someone, the more you make assumptions about what they mean when they say what they say. My partner has this habit of going, oh, whenever something is said. And I always hear that as criticism. Now, she made it that way, but that's how I hear it after many, many years of being together. Another example of command and report that we use all the time is you're sitting in front of the TV, eating your favorite snack, enjoying your movie, and your partner or your child comes into the room and says, is there any ice cream? Now, what you do next will determine what command message you heard. If you put down your stuff and go and get the ice cream, what you heard was not, is there any ice cream? You heard, go get me ice cream. If you heard, go get me ice cream, another response you might make is they say, is there any ice cream? And you say, what, is your leg broken? Now you could just respond to the report. Is there any ice cream? Yes. Right? That's report response only. So how many times a day, if you walk around every day listening to the people that you interact with and you see a response that you're like, how did they get to that response from what the first person said? I guarantee there was a command message that they were hearing, whether intended or not. But that is cybernetic and communication theory ideas that are underpinning the model of MRI. All right, symmetrical and complementary interactions. The more Carla yells, that impacts me to yell more, which impacts her to yell more. That's a symmetrical escalation. We're doing the same thing. It's not that she does it, I do it, she does it, I do it. It's that when she does it, it prompts me to do it. And my doing it prompts her to do it, right? We're not independently acting. We're acting in relationship to each other. The reverse of that, of course, is the complementary interaction, where the more Carla yells, the more I cringe. And my cringing pisses her off even more, so she yells even more. And then I cringe even more. That's the complementary escalation. So again, these are ideas that Bateson and his crew were observing in not only human beings. In fact, a lot of their studies were of animals, particularly otters. They studied otters and dolphins to a great extent. They also came up with some other stuff that you can go read about, like the first and order levels of change, first, second, and third orders of learning, all very fascinating stuff, all playing in the background of the therapy work that we do. And if you want to get deeper into it, I suggest you go read that stuff in Tactics of Change and in Change. But for now, I'll try to keep it to the beginner stuff. I'm already beyond the beginner stuff with all this theory stuff, I understand. So basically the concept is that no matter what's happening, it is part of a cycle. And what Bateson would say is all we can ever really see are partial arcs. We really, as you zoom out, as our ability to capture the cycle gets bigger and bigger, we stop being able to see the entire cycle. But as clinicians, we tend to zoom in to see the interactions between people. And so this is where that concept of the interactional cycle comes from that we use clinically. But that idea that problems or just behaviors, a problem is only a problem because somebody says it's a problem. Otherwise, it's just behavior, right? So if something is happening, that's just behavior. If someone says that's a problem for me, okay, it's a problem for that person. And that prompts my question, how is it a problem for you? And for whom else is it a problem? Otherwise, behavior is just behavior. This is where I get the idea that it's not a problem unless the client says it's a problem. The couple comes in, they have multiple years of heroin use, but they're there to work on their marriage. So if they're not here to work on the heroin use, I don't touch the heroin use. I talk about the marriage. That's what they're here for. It's not a problem unless they say it's a problem. For a lot of clinicians, that's a problem to not identify it as a problem. But then I lean back on everything is connected to everything. So if I work on the marriage, inevitably the heroin has been Irma triangulated in, right? Or that it somehow becomes a member of the marriage, narrative thought, right? So somehow it's connected, but I don't have to push that on them. They'll tell me that as we go along. All righty. So that's some of the theory. It's not all of the theory, but I'm going to try to remember to loop back to some of these theoretical things as we talk about the model, the clinical model itself. So from an MRI perspective, a family is interacting with each other, and there's information loops going on all the time. They call these positive and negative feedback loops. That's going to be an exam question. Positive feedback loops are those that amplify change. Negative feedback loops are those that restrict or reduce change. So teenager goes out, stays out past her bedtime or past her curfew. She comes home and nobody says anything. That's now becoming a positive feedback loop because she was told a rule, she went out, she came home late, but nobody said anything. So now the rule has been reset that she's allowed to do that. If she comes home and she's immediately grounded, that's a negative feedback loop because it returns things back to the previous set of rules. Same thing happens if the first time you go on a date and the date is late. And if you allow that to happen, if you say, okay, no problem, I'll still go out with you, you have now set the precedence that they can always be late, and you cannot complain about it because you accepted it from the beginning. This is how rules within a system are set. Maybe I should talk about a system. Okay. System are multiple people interacting with each other that create a homeostasis and are themselves an entity. Families are a wonderful way to do about that because they're related by legal and blood and choice, and they choose to be together. But you can also see the same systemic ideas in a school classroom or in a club or a bowling league or a federal government. It's all a system. That's one of the beauties of being a systemic family therapist, is that we can work at all these levels, all the way up to United Nations, because those all are systems and they operate in the same way. That's what's kind of crazy, is that the kinds of interactions happen exactly the same way. Irma could go into the United Nations and still see all the Bowen levels of generation and cutoffs and triangles and all that stuff. The structural therapist could see all of the subsystems and the boundaries. Same interactions, all of the models would work at all these different levels. From an MRI perspective, though, we're looking at the homeostasis of the system. Homeostasis is not set. It's dynamic. It's like the wire walker that has the big stick to stay in balance, right? They're on the wire, but they're in constant motion. They're constantly adjusting. That's what families do. They're constantly adjusting to day-to-day events, situations, joys and challenges, growing children, deaths of parents. They're constantly adjusting to circumstances around them. That's homeostasis. However, if change is big enough, then the family then becomes threatened. So homeostasis is threatened when someone gets put in the hospital, they go to jail, they get removed by child welfare. These are all ways in which the system has been disrupted and the homeostasis has been broken. Interestingly, though, no matter what happens, the system maybe expands to now include the jail or expands to include child welfare. And then that system creates its own homeostasis. Any questions so far? Any of this stuff familiar? I'm hoping some of it's familiar.
Some of it, yeah.
Some of it? Okay, good.
Yeah.
All right. Cool. All right. Thanks, Carla, for the thumbs up. Appreciate that. All righty. Okay. So a system that is in homeostasis is able to adjust to changes. The family where the kid came home late might decide to change the rules in a concrete, mindful, open way by saying, you know what, she did fine. She didn't get into trouble. Her grades are great. You know what, maybe she's earned the right to do this. So next time you don't get to break it without telling us, just tell us. So new rule. Sort of feel like I'm Bill Maher. New rule, right? If you wanna stay out past, you let us know because you've earned our trust, right? Those are the rules within the family or any system for that matter. All right. So the goal of therapy, the goal of the MRI therapist is to change the recurring patterns that are maintaining the thing or the behavior that they don't like. Now, this is going to, for those of you who are behaviorists, this is going to sound very behavioral. So behavioral, right? We look at the behavior that we don't like. We look at what's reinforcing it, right? And then the outcome of that reinforcement. So that's presented in a linear fashion. It's the same thing, only we loop back around, right? Kid acts out, mom does what she does, kid what he does in response, and then mom loops back and responds again. It's a constant cycle. Carla has small children. I know that you're familiar with this on a daily basis, right? That it's not, I provide an intervention and my child is perfect. I provide an intervention and the child does what the child does, and then I have to respond again, and it goes round and round and round. So in MRI, we have to define the problem clearly. Let me go back. Let me give you a little more history. So the MRI team were a bunch of researchers. And then Don Jackson, who was, I believe, a psychiatrist, decided to take these ideas into the clinic, to actually use these ideas with patients. And they originally did it with schizophrenics, as a matter of fact. They also drew on Milton Erickson, who is the father of American hypnotherapy and hypnosis. His famous story, as an example of reframe, is he was working on a psychiatric unit, and there was a guy who believed that he was Jesus Christ. So what Milton Erickson did was he went up to the man to begin working with him, and he said, I understand that you have some experience with carpentry, and took him to the woodworking shop. So that's a big whopping reframe, but it's also a connection, isn't it? To, if his belief system is he's the Christ, then he has to be a carpenter. Because if you're gonna take the whole metaphor, you got to take it all. So the idea in MRI is also to use these ideas of reframe, to look at situations and look at them in unique ways, to reframe them, to look at them in the larger context. You can't just look at the Christ as the one who reportedly died on the cross. We have to look at his history and the family he was in and everything that came with it in order to use this metaphor in the maximum way. Alrighty, so Don Jackson was learning these ideas from Bateson. He sent off Jay Haley to go learn about hypnotherapy, and they brought that back, and they were working with clients. And at one point, they decided that it would be fun to try out these ideas on the worst of the worst cases from other colleagues. So they set up a clinic on Fridays that they invited clinicians from all over the area to send clients that were stuck clients that nobody could do anything with. And they had the whole one-way mirror thing, right? So I don't know if you've ever seen one of those suites, and it's 2 rooms with a one-way mirror, and the team would be behind it on one side, and the client and the therapist would be on the other side, so the team could watch what was going on. And so the story goes that the team members had so much ego that when they would see something going on in the therapy room, they thought they had a better idea. So they would walk in and give their intervention and then walk back out again. And that then got concretized in the Milan systemic family model, because why? Jay Haley went and trained the Milan team in Italy. So there's another connection to our other MFT models. So they continued to work on seeing these worst of the worst cases. And it's out of that work that they devised the strategies, the steps, so to speak, of MRI. So MRI is the short term, but it's also known as brief problem-focused therapy. So as opposed to solution-focused, this is problem-focused, and it's brief. When they set up the clinic, they said among themselves, we're going to give people 10 sessions. That's it, 10 sessions. We're going to see how much can we get accomplished in just those 10 sessions. And those are some of the parameters they built into the model as they began to develop it. And it's kind of interesting how many of our models are devised out of teams. So solution focused was out of the team that were working in Milwaukee. The Milan team were the 4 psychiatrists in Milan, Italy. Narrative came out of the Dulwich Center and the teams that were working there. So many of our models came out of teams of people trying new ideas and then writing it up as a model. And MRI was one of the first to do that. All right, so the basic steps of MRI: customership. who is the person that has brought the family or has decided that therapy should happen. Now, solution focused has those ideas, right? Solution focused has visitor, complainant, and customer, right? Those three ideas. They got that from MRI. MRI wants to know who you ask the family, who hired me? Who wants this therapy to happen? Jay Haley of strategic fame would then take that further and say, I have to join with that person because that's the person that can bring the family back. So you got to join with the one whose idea it was to come here. Sometimes the person who wants the family to be there is not in the room. Child welfare, the judge, the JPO, the school teacher, those kind of folks. Sometimes they send the kid in alone, God forbid. And so we have to find out whose idea was it for you, Johnny, to be here. Of course, that's more difficult now that we're doing telehealth because mom can park Johnny in front of the computer and walk away. It's a little bit harder in person because mom had to bring Johnny, so we're going to get mom to come in. And if you look in the 70s and 80s, there's a whole slew of articles devoted to getting the absent parent to engage in therapy. Typically the father back then, could be either parent now, step parent, etc. But there's all this talk about how do we get the absent members to come in to therapy. So it's really important to know who hired you because that will very much inform what you do. As all of you know who have ever worked with children, children never have a problem, or at least they don't have a problem they think is in them. They might have a problem with their parent, but they don't have a problem ever. So then we have to reframe the problem to be, okay, Carla, you don't have a problem. Your problem is you want to get those people off your back. That's what your problem is. And that almost always engages people. Yes, I want to get them off my back. Fantastic. Pardon me, Brian?
Oh, I'm sorry. And get some ice cream. Sorry.
And get some ice cream. Definitely. Definitely. So we then have to define the problem. Now, it's important to understand that every member of the system is probably going to have a slightly different definition of the problem, so that it becomes really our job as therapists to really kind of meld that into a problem that is common enough among the group that we're working on the same thing. Now, this got further taken by collaborative language. Collaborative language says that a problem isn't a problem until a system grows up around it and points at the thing and says that's a problem. And then our job as therapists is to find out from each person their point of view about the problem. Well, MRI started that. That's their thing, is that we have to know the point of view of every member of the family, even the ones that aren't present. That's why the hallucinating in other family members. Now, as I go through these, I'm going through them in order because paper is lineal that way, but it doesn't necessarily happen in a lineal fashion. So you might want to find out who hired you, but that might not come out until later. The family may not have a clear problem definition. It's been my experience that the problem they say they're here for tends not to be the thing I end up working with. As we ask about it and we find out how it's a problem, it tends to morph as we go along. So what is a problem? For whom is it a problem? How is it a problem? Once we get there, then we can look at interactional cycle, failed solution attempts, and the position of the client. Interactional cycle. So remember I said earlier that problems are maintained from a cybernetic perspective. Problems are maintained by recursive patterns. And so as we track the interactional cycle, we are tracking that cycle that is maintaining the problem. Now, we're not going to say that to them. We're not going to say, Mom, Dad, the way you're interacting is maintaining the problem, because they're going to fire us at that point. No, no, no. We're going to say, okay, when Johnny comes home and does the thing he does that you hate, what do you do? And then what does Johnny do? And then what does the other parent do? And then what does Johnny do? And you keep tracking that detail by detail. I often tell my students, it's like watching a movie frame by frame. You slow down that process. If I were to ask Alexandra, so Alexandra, tell me the last fight you had with your partner. Chances are good she'd say, well, he said this and I said that, and then he stomped off, argument done. Okay, so if we look at a circle, there's 3 points. We got 3 points in there. Okay, I know that there were a dozen things that led up to the first point. I know that there's at least a dozen things that happened between point 1 and point 2, and another dozen that happened between point 2 and point 3, and all of that lead up that comes back to point 1. And that's the importance. That's why it's important to track the interactional cycle all the way around. It's not enough that partner said this and Alexandra said that and partner stomped off, done. Because it's just as important to find out, how does partner come back and what do they do and what happens that then leads up to the partner says the thing that sets this all off again. Remember, circles do not have beginnings and ends. They just go round and round and round. So one of the benefits of the interactional cycle is that no one is to blame, or everyone is to blame. Either way, it works, but no one is to blame exclusively. No one person can be in charge of making that whole cycle happen. It requires everybody else to participate. That, by the way, is another interesting concept that came out of Bateson. Is he said that there's no such thing as the concept of power. The only reason that I am talking and the rest of you aren't is because you've all decided to give me the power to do so. If you didn't give me the power to do so, I couldn't be doing this. Now, there are others like the feminist who said, you're not paying attention to gender issues. And so this concept of there is no such thing as power is hotly debated among the models. And we've all decided to kind of agree that we can live in all of those worlds. But that is essentially a major concept of MRI, is that if domestic violence is going on, that to some degree, everybody's cooperating with it, to some degree. Now, it may not be that the woman is necessarily, that the person being abused, see, I almost went gender there, that the person being abused is not, it's not that they're not a victim of something, or that something bad isn't happening. But there's all kinds of people around that that's allowing that to continue, that allows this behavior to go unremarked. That's why it's often very important in MRI to expand the system that we're looking at, to get beyond not just the individual, but beyond the family, even into the systems that are around. And by moving out like that, that's what collaborative language took up the banner of saying, that's what we do. We always look at the larger system. All right. So Danielle, can you be my client for 5 minutes?
Absolutely. What's wrong with me?
Fantastic. I don't know. You have children. No, you have dogs, don't you?
I have all of it.
You have all of it. Okay. So without revealing anything that you wouldn't want the whole YouTube to be able to know, what would you say is a problem that you have sometimes in your household?
Problem I have sometimes in my household. Well, I can pick one that like everybody can relate to. People just drop all their dishes in the sink all day long, and then I walk in and it's like, oh, I have to magically clear the sink again. Okay, thanks, 5 people that live here.
Right. Okay. Okay. Now, so you're concerned, the thing that you're observing is people putting dishes in the sink and not washing them, or not putting them in the dishwasher. That thing. Okay. So Danielle, how is that a problem for you?
Well, because I'm exhausted, because I'm washing dishes all the time. I have better things to do. Many, many better things to do. I'm a student.
Okay. Okay. So help me to understand, how did it happen that you got voted as dishwasher?
Because I'm mom, so I have a sign on my head that says does all the chores.
Oh, how did that happen? How did you get the sign on your forehead?
I think it happened somewhere between the toddler and the 8-year-old just deciding that they were not going to participate in such things.
Oh, so they made a decision to not participate in such things. And so did you put the sign on your forehead, or did your children put the sign on your forehead?
No, I absolutely did, because I haven't demanded that they do that.
I see. Oh, okay. So you've not demanded. So they made a decision, we're not going to do this.
Mhm.
You didn't demand them to do it.
Mhm.
You hung a sign on your forehead, and therefore they put stuff in the sink expecting you to do it because you haven't communicated otherwise. And so
Yes.
they go merrily on your way, and then you end up fuming.
Yes, because
Okay.
also the children that are now tall enough to even reach the sink, because before it was like they'd get the step stool out and then I was falling over the step stool if they tried to put the dishes in the thing. So it was a whole thing. So then I was like, no, just don't get the step stool out, just throw it in the sink. And so then I trapped myself into, I'm just always going
Okay.
to do the dishes.
So part of this was the inconvenience of the step stool and not tripping over it, and all the
literally almost
arguments to
broken
get
every
them to do
toe
it
over
and
the step
that
stool.
kind of stuff.
Yes,
Okay.
it's acceptable.
So another classic MRI question is, why now? So in the past, you've been doing the dishes for a long time. You've got the mom sign on. You didn't want to trip over those steps, the step stool all the time.
Yep.
But now it's a problem. Now it's not okay. What changed? How is it a problem now that it was just disgruntlement before?
Well, I think they're old enough now to take some more personal responsibility and to participate in the goings on of the kitchen. If you want to
Okay.
snack all day long and use every bowl and spoon, then put it in the dishwasher.
Right. Okay. So what's changed is the kids got a little older.
Mhm.
You got busy. You're in graduate school,
Exactly.
and you don't have time to do all the chores that you used to do. And besides which, the kids are old enough and tall enough that they could physically do this without the step stool that you trip over.
Exactly. They can
Okay,
do it
so
now.
help me out here. So you walk into the kitchen, dishes everywhere. What do you say?
Well, usually I just start mumbling to myself in anger and do them.
So you mumble to yourself in anger, and you go ahead and do them. And then what
Yes.
happens?
And then at some point later in the day, I'll trip over something else and then just get really frustrated and start yelling at people. Even though it was really about the dishes.
I see. So you get frustrated about that, and then you start yelling at people. Okay. And then what do the people do that are being yelled at?
They look at me confused because they don't
They
know
look
what
at
the
you
actual
confused.
problem
Okay.
is.
Like what's up with you, mom? And then what happens?
And then they apologize and say, "Oh, we can help, mommy." And I'm like, "Oh, good. Then why don't you just do it?"
Right. Okay. So they vow to help,
Yeah.
and then you say, yeah, but then why? So why don't you do it? You get them again.
Because
Okay.
they need
And
to
then
be
what happens?
constantly reminded. And I always just feel like I don't, if I'm going to constantly remind you, I might as well just do it myself.
Gotcha.
So then I fall back into
so
my pattern.
they have managed then to set the rule that if we look confused enough, and if we delay enough, she's going to go do it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's the rule.
They
that's
have
the rule
trained
you've
me.
let them make.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Gang, did that make sense? Did that interactional cycle make sense? Right? Yeah. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Carla, you were laughing. Is this something that happens in your house all the time now? Is your kid tall enough to get to the dishes?
No, I just think it's hilarious how you recounted. So you're there, you got the hi, I'm the mom, I do all the chores sign, and then you did it just like how you just feed it right back. You just feed it right on back to her.
Yep.
And you don't protect her from taking any responsibility about her part of the flow.
Well, because, yes, in this case, because it's a parent-child, she has more authority to make something happen. Bateson wouldn't like it, but she has more power. She has more control over the household. Interestingly, Danielle, if you read Tactics of Change, one of my very favorite cases is the last one where the intervention that the team gave mother, because she had the similar thing, that the daughter was constantly complaining about things, and mom could never never meet with the child and never meet with the child wanted, and was getting really upset at the child's demands.
Yeah.
And so the team told her to be incompetent.
Well,
To
I will say
wash her
incompetency
sweater and
does have
shrink it.
some benefits, because I'm really bad at laundry, and my husband just started doing all the laundry and putting it all away. He took
Listen.
it from me because evidently he doesn't like how I do it. So I'm like, evidently
and-
my incompetence has now taken an entire task away from me.
You know what?
Which is fantastic.
Kids and spouses have been learning the power of incompetence for millennia.
It's not really in my DNA to be bad at stuff, but hey, it's working. So I'll take
I
it.
remember the
Great.
case in the MRI, tactics have changed, where the therapist told the wife, burn the toast.
Yeah, burn the toast, shrink the sweater,
Right.
right? Be in, and then go, I don't know what's wrong with me. I just can't seem to be doing.
Stop being so perfect.
To be self-depreciating, apologetic, but no better.
No,
right?
willfully ignorant to what's happening around me. I'm just like, oh, I don't do the laundry anymore. I don't know what happened.
Yeah.
Great.
Wouldn't that be interesting if you stopped doing dishes or only washed a dish for yourself?
Well, when you really hear about it, when they actually run out of bowls and run out of spoons, and then they're like, where are they? I'm like, well, there's soap and there's a pile of dishes, so you guys can figure it out.
Right. Yeah, you could do that. I think the MRI therapist would say to you, don't even help them that much. If they go, where are the cups and bowls? You can say, I don't know. I don't know where they went.
That's great.
Be really incompetent. Yeah.
Oh, I'm going to master it. I'm working on it.
All right. So that's the interactional cycle. You're trying to find the pattern, the loop that keeps maintaining the problem. And we heard that the kids have learned to be incompetent, and Danielle then, in Bowen terms, is over functioning and the kids are under functioning, right? Remember, you can't talk about any case and not talk about it in all the other models terms as well if you want to. Okay. One of the things that's a little bit different, that's particular to MRI, is the concept of the failed solution attempts. Now, this is, as you know, the polar opposite of solution focused, that would look for the exceptions, right? So solution focused would look for, when does the problem not happen? When do you successfully manage the problem? MRI would say, what have you tried that hasn't worked? All the things you've tried. Now, parents will say, I've tried everything. And you'll say, great, tell me all the things you've tried. The MRI theory would say that almost always the list of things that they say they've tried everything tends to be pretty short, only a couple. And they tend to be all from the same class of behaviors. They tend to all be permissive, or all be punishment, or all be accommodating, right? They tend not to go across categories. And so when the parent says, I've tried everything, I've tried grounding, I've tried taking things away, I've tried yelling, I mean, these are all punishments, all of them. But this is important for us as a therapist to know. What is the category of behaviors that these solution attempts are pulled from? So we know what the problem is. We know who the customer is. We've tracked that problem in action in the interactional cycle between the people, the relationship in which the problem happens. That's another MRI and frankly solution systemic theory, is that no problem happens in an individual. It happens in a relationship between people. All of the models would subscribe to that concept. We've gotten the list of failed attempts. Now we also want to find out, what does this problem and the things that they're doing, what does it mean to them? So the MRI people said there are basically three positions. That the person is a bad person, the person that's the problem, right? So Danielle can look at her kids not doing dishes and say they're bad children. Or they're sad children. They're, oh, poor thing, they have ADHD. Poor thing, they've had trauma. Poor thing, they've, we've been divorced and they don't have their father. Poor thing, something happened. They're sad. Or they said mad, but mad in this case is not angry, but crazy, impaired. So they're schizophrenic, they're ADHD, they're bipolar, whatever. So mad, bad, sad. So that they're saying from the theory that no matter what the person says, it will probably fit into one of those categories, that they're mad, bad, or sad. And back up here, when I was saying that with these things and these concepts, remember, we see our reality according to our epistemology. Our epistemology is our beliefs about what's going on, right? So we act according to what we believe is reality. So if my belief is that little Johnny is a bad kid, he's evil, he's demon spawn of that horrible husband that was so terrible to me. He's a bad kid. He's just like his terrible father. I'm going to interact with Johnny very differently than if I thought, oh, poor Johnny, he's lost his father. His father and I, we just couldn't keep our marriage together, and we exposed him to all of this arguments. Poor thing, no wonder he doesn't want to do the dishes. Or, poor Johnny, he has ADHD. I tell him to do chores, but he just can't remember. I give him one thing. If I give him 3 things to do, I'm lucky if he does any one of them because it just overloads him. So those are examples of the position of the client, the frame of reference in which their behavior and their solution attempts are connected. So you can pretty well guess from the solution attempts what the position of the client is. So now what? So that's when we go into the intervention. So you may have heard at some point along the way the idea of the 180-degree different solution. But it's more complicated than just 180 degrees. It's 180 degrees from the previous solution attempts. So you have to know what the other solution attempts are so that you don't touch any of those, that you are as 180 degree different from them as you can imagine, or as the client can imagine. It has to be a behavior change that will interrupt the interactional cycle. So we kind of gave an example of that when Danielle was saying, when the kids come to her and say, there's no cups and plates. And she says, huh, I wonder how that happened. I don't know. I don't know what happened to them, right?
Weird. Which
is different from the previous yelling, being disgruntled, doing it herself, all of those things, right? So this gives her very different behavior so that she is different in the interactional cycle. The example they like to give all the time in cybernetics is it's like a tennis match of 4 people, right? A doubles tennis match. I don't know which person is going to put down the racket first, so I'm going to work on all 4 of them, but I only have to get one of them to put down their racket to be different for the game to entirely change. So we look at the entire interactional cycle, what each person does. By the way, we have kids in the room, right? So we're also going to be hearing from the kids that mom yells at them for no good reason, but because they haven't made the connection back to the dishes. And so I would have to ask lots of questions as I was doing the interactional cycle, is what does she yell about? What's going on right before mom was yelling at you? And what happens after she's yelling at you? And what do you do in response to her yelling? So I have to get all of those details, not just from her, but from all of the parties. I also need to know, by the way, what her husband's doing. So when he walks through and there's dishes all over the place, what does he do? Does he read the sign and mom does all the chores as well? Or does he get after the kids to do it? I don't know, but I want to know all of that. I want to know all the parties and what they're doing. Why? Because every single point, all 365 degrees, gives me 365 different openings to do something different. Because if it's not different at this point, it might get different this point. If mom isn't the one that does it differently, maybe dad is, maybe kids are. I'm going to work on all the players to do something different. In fact, I'm going to provide everybody homework to go home and try. So my interventions, and there's probably plural, my interventions are designed to interrupt the cycle, be 180 degree different from all the previous solution attempts, and requires a shift in the position, that they have to shift from bad to mad or mad to sad No one of those positions is good, by the way, or better than the rest. It's that whatever one you're in, if it's not working, it's not working. And so we have to shift to something else. This is what I affectionately call the Dr. Phil intervention. So how's that working for you? So you yell at them. So how's that working for you? So they don't do the dishes. How's that working for you? Right? I'm finding out, and I'm not. He probably says it sarcastically. I mean it for real. How's that work? How does that happen? Right? I want to gather all of that data. Okay. I have a whole extra page on interventions. You'll love it. From Tactics of Change. So many of the interventions that the MRI therapist uses are designed from the one down position. Now, this is a strategic model. So you take a one down in order to be one up. Here's an example. A famous journalist was interviewing a famous person. And the famous person said, I'll allow you to start. So who had the power? The famous person, not the famous journalist, right? So by taking the one down, they actually took a one up. So the MRI therapist says, I don't want you to change too fast. Don't listen. So between now and next week when I see you, I don't want you to do anything different about the dishes. I want you to look for opportunities, Danielle, to do something, but I don't want you to actually do it. Boys, I don't want you to necessarily do the dishes, but I do want you to really observe what mom's doing. Really watch what's happening with her and what's happening to her mood, and see if you can predict when she's going to start yelling. So I don't want you to do anything. This is the observing task that is very famous out of solution focused, only it's reversed. So go home and look for the moments of the miracle, right? That's the classic solution focused one. We do the miracle and then don't do anything different. Just this week, look for moments when the miracle happens. This is just the reverse. Look for moments when you could do something different, but don't do it. The beauty of this is if they don't do it, they followed my instructions. If they did do it and it worked, I can be pleasantly surprised. If they do it and it doesn't work, I get to say, oh, no, you went too fast. Slow down. So I win no matter what they do. I win meaning I maintain my flexibility. I am able to maneuver in this system without being wrong, without them getting to say, see, Schooley's a lousy therapist. Not that they don't say that, but I try not to make that happen. All right. So the foundations of this model are the Bateson cybernetic theories, hypnosis, Bateson other stuff, but also cybernetics, constructivism, that idea that reality is constructed, there is no real, general systems theory, that systems are in relationship to each other, that evolution is not the horse developing stronger teeth. It's the horse develops stronger teeth evolutionarily as the grass gets tougher, and the grass gets tougher in response to the horse's teeth getting stronger, that they co-evolve. So that concept that systems, everybody within the system co-evolve, that's general systems ideas. And then of course, communication theory. You cannot not communicate. All right, here's some of the, so get ready with your camera to take a picture of these references. Oh, it keeps moving on me. All right, so there's Tactics of Change. So Fish, Weekland, and Siegel. And here's Change, Václavic, Weekland, and Fish. And then others, the other articles, things like that are kind of fun. I don't think there's any on the last page. Oh, and then so there's one more. Propagations. What I like about propagations is there's a lot of articles by other models that talk about their connection to MRI. So there's one in there from Salvini Palazzoli that talks about how MRI informed Milan, that sort of thing, right? So did you guys get a snapshot of it? Did you get it? Okay, great. All right, so I am going to get rid of this. All right, so here's a whole thing on, am I at the top? Here we go. A whole thing on MRI interventions. So they, the MRI people in tactics decided that there are particular patterns that happen all the time. So attempting to force something which can only occur spontaneously, or attempting to master a feared event by postponing it, or attempting to reach accord, think couples therapy, through opposition. This is the behavior that they're doing, right? Or attempting to obtain compliance through voluntarism. I want the person to want to do it. Or confirming the accuser's suspicion by attempting to defend oneself. And then there's the general intervention. So let's go to the general intervention, some of which you've heard already. So go slow. Don't make change too fast. Change has to evolve. So go slow. It's fascinating that the slower you go, the faster the change happens. The slower you assess, the more detail you get in that interactional cycle, the more you get on your list of failed solution attempts, the deeper you get into their position, the more precise your intervention will be. And it's like magic. It's amazing when you get the intervention right. I once saw Dick Schwartz demonstrate this, and he did not think of the intervention, which I thought was beautiful, because I always thought as I read this stuff that I had to come up with it. And in the books, it does seem like they came up with it. But Dick Schwartz in this demonstration didn't. What he said to the person that was the one that wanted the change to happen, once that he did all of that assessment, he said, what's the thing that you would do differently? Danielle, what's the thing you would do differently around this problem of the dishes that would be so different and so shocking to your family that their jaws would drop? So I, as a therapist, don't have to come with that to ignore them. That would shock them.
That would shock them, because
That would
they
shock
know
them.
I like to keep the sink clear all the time. So they would be
Right.
like, what's wrong with mom?
Right. So that would really get their attention. Okay. And so we would build the intervention based on that, because I would never have guessed that ignoring them would be the thing that was dramatically different. So they know better than I do. So that's a way to get at the intervention. All right. Another general intervention is the dangers of improvement, the dangers of change. MRI would do an entire assessment around if this changed. They would actually do both, which, by the way, solution focused. Any of you have heard of the solution focused nightmare question? We have the miracle question, and we have the nightmare question. If things don't change, how bad will it get? MRI did that long time ago. If things don't change, where is it going to go? How bad is it going to get? And the other one is, if this were changed, if we got this thing to be different, what would be the consequence? What would be the downside? So if the attic gets clean, the downside might be all these people are going to expect more of me now if I'm clean. If I start doing, if mom ignores me and I start doing the dishes, I might have to do the dishes all the time. So there is always an upside and always a downside. And so they'll tell you, yeah, here's the upside. This is all the wonderful things that will happen if this change happens. Be sure you also get the downside. So what will be not so pleasant? MRI also used to ask things, or will ask things like, so mom, if you're not doing all these dishes, what are you going to be doing with all your free time? What are you going to do when you're not having to do the dishes? What are you going to do with all that free time? Right?
I don't know.
Study, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, sit
I don't
down.
know. Go for a massage
Go
with
for a
Gypsy
walk.
there. Yeah. Right. Go for a walk.
Yes.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
So these are the, so we're wanting, remember, everything is a cycle. So if we change this piece of the cycle, the kids start doing dishes, what does the rest of the cycle look like? Because we want to be ecological in understanding that a change here is going to affect the entire system. And If you want to affect the system, you only need to have one tiny little change. One little tiny change will make the whole system be different. So you just got to look for one little change that has the biggest bang for your buck. All right, but we talk about the dangers of improvement. Okay, making a U-turn. So this is where I get the concept, if anybody's ever heard me say, that the easiest person to change in the therapy room is the therapist. Because if I'm interacting with this family, I am part of this system now. I'm interacting with them. So the easiest person to change is me. So this is where I might do a U-turn. I might U-turn. I might shift from one position to another. I might be more directive or less directive. I might get more people involved or get more people out. All right. This is usually required when the therapist has unwittingly become argumentative with the client and has failed to recognize it. That's one of my rules: never argue with a client, because of this. Gets me stuck if I start arguing. Some of you have also heard me say the 3 ways to goof up as a therapist is wrong people. In other words, you don't have the person in the room that can truly affect change. Wrong problem. It's really not about the dishes. It's about mom and dad having a fight. That's really what's happening. Or I get invested in an outcome. If I get invested in how something goes, I'm going to lose, because the system can treat me like sand in an oyster. They'll just put pearl around me until I don't affect them anymore. So I have to be able to push the system a little bit to affect change. The MRI people used to say that when you look at the organism, you give it a bump and watch it jump. Right? You push at it and see what happens. All right. Let's see how to worsen the problem. That's another kind of U-turn. Utilize when the client has already resisted. Now, this is before Steve DeShazer and resistance is dead. So just be kind. All right. The client has always resisted a previous suggestion or has indicated that they are reluctant to try something new. This is what we would often call going hopeless. I don't know what to suggest that will help. I can give you some ideas of how to make it worse. We can certainly talk about that, right? So, or I really don't know. I really don't know how to help you. I'm at a loss right now. That's the going hopeless intervention. All right, but what they talked about, how to worsen the problem. All right. So those are some of the general standard ones. Did you all get a photo of that? Did you all get a snap of that? If you didn't, I'll give you a second. Gypsy didn't. Okay. So maybe Gypsy will, at the end of this, Gypsy, I'll when I stop the recording, I'll let you take a snap of it. Okay. All right. Then we have all these others. So let me get that page so you can take a snap of that. All right. So attempting to force something that can only occur spontaneously. Sexual performance, urinary function, things that naturally fluctuate. Usually resolved by simply giving up self-coercive attempts. The intervention is to explicitly instruct the client to perform either another behavior that is mutually exclusive, or the other one that is often done is to prescribe the symptom, to do more of it, to do more of what's not working. So you can swing either way, but the idea is to amplify, either amplify the problem behavior until they get sick of it, or to provide an intervention that renders them unable to do the problem behavior. Now that may take a little thinking, but performing the symptom on purpose, performing the symptom as a beginning step towards eventual control, and to fail on purpose. That's the incompetent mother, right? Fail on purpose, right? So that's the attempting to force something that can only occur spontaneously. Some of these came directly from Milton Erickson. Milton Erickson tells a story that the MRI people knew of a married couple where they both had, or a couple that were reluctant to get married because they both had nocturnal enuresis. They peed the bed. And so what he had them do on their wedding night is to get on the bed and pee the bed on purpose. So he prescribed the symptom. Now, what did that do? It didn't stop their enuresis, but what it did is it took away the fear. They were instructed to do it by the doctor. The good doctor made them do it. And so when it happened, they no longer were embarrassed about it because they had done it mutually at the same time on their wedding night, for heaven's sakes. And then they could laugh about it. Right? I'm sure that he built it up in a whole different way. If you want an amazing book, and now, Chris, I can't remember the name of it. It's a Milton Erickson book where he devises, it's the Milton Erickson case book. That's what it's called. Milton Erickson case book, where there are hundreds and hundreds of case scenarios that Milton Erickson used, his hypnosis ideas, which are directly taken into MRI. MRI was directly influenced by Milton Erickson and his way of devising interventions. So it's a great read. It's in there is the story about, oh, I understand that you have some experience with carpentry. That story is in there. Many of those stories. It's a great read, and it'll give you all kinds of interesting ideas of how to reframe and to think differently about client problems. All right, well, I'm looking at, so if you got a chance to snap this, great. Here's the last page of it. Let's see, can I get it all on one page here, one screen? Maybe not. So you snap this one, get a chance to snap this one, and then I'll scroll it in a second. But I'm looking at the time. I know I've gone over my hour. If these have been interesting, if you've enjoyed this, we can certainly talk more about it at another time. Okay, Brian has given me a thumbs up that he got it. And so here's the bottom of that page in case you didn't get it. So take a snap of that. And so then you'll have all of my notes, and people watching this on YouTube can get that as well. All righty. So let's see if I got all the questions. So I talked about the history and how MRI informs other models. I've talked about the importance of the interactional cycle. I've talked about how it's used with stuck clients, and these interventions are about stuck clients. Talked about some common questions and what success looks like when you're doing MRI. I had someone who wrote in a question about the concept of non-pathology. So that's connected to that idea of the interactional cycle and how either no one is to blame or everybody is to blame. There can be no pathology if everybody is to blame, right? So no person can be sick because whatever it is happening in relationship between peoples. So no one is wrong. And as you can see, this is an idea that morphs into over there in the narrative world, right? Where you externalize the problem. The problem is not in the person. The problem is the problem. It's externalized, right? So similar concept there. Now, whether the narrative people would claim that they took it from MRI, I don't know, but you can see the connection there in those ideas. Those are all the questions that were set to me. Questions from you all? Yes, Brian.
We were just talking about the lack of pathology here, and if everyone's to blame or no one's to blame. But in the position of the client, one of the three positions is that concept of MAD, and in your words, I thought it was not actually a mental illness or those kinds of things. And if one of the members of the family is pointing to and blaming a pathology on that, how does that fit in with that model?
Interestingly, so let's take it out of mental health and let's put it into medical. Okay, so someone comes in and says that our problem is that our child has diabetes. All right, well, I'm not going to be able to change that. That's outside my scope. So I'm going to have to ask, how is that a problem?
Sure.
How is the diabetes a problem? Right? Fill in the blank. How is the ADHD, bipolar, schizophrenia, depression? Same idea. How is it a problem? It's there. How is it a problem? Right? It's usually not the thing. It's the problem that we've created around the thing.
Okay, very good. That I absolutely get it.
Does that get it?
Yeah. Yep.
Good, good. All right. Anyone else have a question? Meredith, you got a question for me? No question. Carla, you got a question for me? You're looking at these notes? Maybe you have a question about the notes?
Yeah,
Go
I
ahead.
do have a question. I don't understand on the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 how.
Number 5.
Well, no. Let's go to 4.
Okay.
Attempting to obtain compliance through volunteerism.
Yes. Right. So this is the partner who says, my partner should just do that because they love me. They should just do it. They should just know I need this. They should just volunteer to do this. Right. I shouldn't have to tell them.
Okay, but hover further up from there.
Yep.
I need context for what these things mean. These are interventions. So I don't understand. How does this fit? So like,
okay. So the
couple comes in, and then what do you do with that?
Okay. So this set of interventions is connected to this set of problems. So attempting to reach accord through opposition is, thank you. I didn't explain that well. These are the problems that the client is coming in and trying, the couple is coming in and they're trying to reach accord through fighting all the time.
Oh, that's what I do.
All right. And so then MRI would say, here are the interventions to address this kind of a problem.
Okay. Thank you.
Making more sense?
I
good.
Couldn't figure out what that meant. Okay.
Good. Thank you for asking for me to clarify. Thank you.
Yeah.
Now all those people who took a picture of the notes know what they have. All right. Ellen, any question for me?
No, I have a lot of things that are going through my head based on different connections, because I do look at systems. That's where all my esoteric work comes in.
Sure.
You know what I mean? And there's a lot of ways to reframe thinking. Oh, I've got bad arthritis. Well, your thinking is bitter, and that's holding it, all that type of thing. If I'm using that metaphor. And then there's interesting connections when I start comparing astrological charts. And it becomes a guidance, and it's not me, or like if I read a card, it's not me that's talking. It's, how's about this suggestion? What do you think? It's kind of wacky, but that type of thing. So I'm just
and that's a classic MRI way to introduce an intervention. To say, I don't know if this will work. It's kind of a crazy idea. I don't know. If it doesn't fit for you, just spit it out. That's all. One down. And
that's what
right.
I do that.
But here's the suggestion, right?
Here's
so that's
what
classic
I see.
MRI taking a one down.
That's what I do. I say, here's what I see, and if it resonates, great. Doesn't, whatever. But
right.
Actually,
it's the interventions are not they are not prescriptions. They are experiments. Go experiment with this. Go play with this. See what happens. I forgot something. Ellen, you reminded me. I really appreciate that.
Okay.
Remember, I talked about this idea of the symmetrical and complementary interactions. Okay. Let me give you a little bit more about that and talk about how that's related to intervention. So the way to stop a symmetrical escalation is for one of the parties to go complementary. The way to stop a complementary interaction is for one of them to go symmetrical. The example is when two lions fight, they're being symmetrical until one of them rolls over and shows their neck and goes complementary. That stops the fight. Now let's talk about the lion is chasing the gazelle, right? The gazelle is trying to get away and the lion is aggressing. We're going to consider that a complementary escalation. Okay. If the gazelle turns and attacks the lion's going to be downfunded. Wait a minute, you're not playing according to the rules, right? And it's going to stop momentarily. Okay. So if we look at these designing an intervention that, as I said before, has to provide a different point of view, a different position. Mad, bad, sad. It has to be 180-degree different from all the previous solution attempts. And it has to interrupt the cycle. But I propose to you to think one more way, that that you, as you do the interactional cycle, as you're watching it, you determine, is this a symmetrical or a complementary interaction?
Interesting.
And when you provide the intervention, it's to flip it to the other one. If what they're doing is always symmetrical, your intervention interrupts by making one of them complementary. If it tends to be complementary, you work on one of them to go symmetrical, right? And that's like, you know, the ultimate way to stop this pattern that keeps repeating.
Right.
But as I said before, this takes a lot of assessment. This is typically not a model where you're going to give them something at the end of the first session that's going to go home and be wonderful, right? Now, sometimes I can tell you a story. Very young, very, very young therapist, didn't know what the hell I was doing. Family comes in and has a problem with their young daughter. I knew about solution attempts. I knew how to get that. Okay, so I said to the family, okay, what are all the things that you've tried? And I made a list, literally made a physical list, all the things that they've tried. Oh shit, what else okay, I'm not a very good therapist. I'm brand new at this. But I could do percentages. So I went through and said, okay, what percentage of the time do you do each of these? All right, I got all of those. Okay, all the percentages. Then for a moment, I stepped over into solution focus, didn't know I was. And I went through and I said, okay, what's the percentage of each of those working? So I got so I have the failed solution attempts, all of the percentages of how often they used it, and all the percentages of the things of how often it worked. And I bet you can guess what we discovered. We discovered that the thing they did the least often worked the best, and the thing they did the most often worked the least. And I gave it to them and I said, I don't know what to tell you, but I guess you could go look at that. Just come back next week, tell me what you think. And they came back and they said, it was a great week. We don't need to see you anymore. We just came in to tell you that everything is fine. So sometimes it can happen that fast. It really can. Now that was an easy case. We're not talking about, you know, child abuse, domestic violence, horrific trauma. You know, I'm not talking about any of that stuff. Pretty simple case, an appropriate case for a brand new therapist. But that is an example of using the ideas, and it can be that impactful as people see things differently. Okay. Gypsy, you're at a place where you could ask a question.
Is this recording going to like go to our inbox at all?
It's going to be posted to the Florida Interest Network YouTube channel. So look for that in a week or so. I'm going on vacation next week, so I may not get it up there. But yeah, I will get it up there eventually. So yeah, so you'll be able to take photos from these notes. Exactly. Okay. So I appreciate that question. Anyone else have a question? Anybody? No? Well, I thank you very much. I hope that you will go on Facebook, look at the Florida Interest Network Facebook page, answer the couple of questions, and get yourself on there. The list of all of our workshops for the rest of the year have been posted, and all the workshops between now and June already have a YouTube link, so you can take that and come to our future events. I thank you all very much for coming, and have a terrific evening.
Thanks, Dr. Schooley.
Thank you, Dr. Schooley.
Thank you, Dr. Schooley. You
This is
are
awesome.
the
Keep doing it.
best.
Thank you.
It was so much
Keep
fun.
doing it.
Great presentation.
Yep.
Very good.
Thank you.